Welcome to India Sense. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi, and this week on the show will be the dynamics as far as the Iran-Israel war is concerned, how India and Indians around the world are being impacted by this ongoing conflict. The economic impact, the strategic fallout, the political war of words in India will all be decoded. First up, a quick check of the latest updates coming in of the conflict. The Iran war enters its second week. Have the dynamics of the conflict now changed? With Iran saying that neighboring countries will no longer be attacked unless an attack on Iran originates from there. First Indian statement on the ongoing Iran-Israel war, with External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar saying that India allowed the docking of an Iranian ship on humanitarian grounds.
We got a message from the Iranian side that one of the ships, which presumably was closest to us, to our waters at that point of time, wanted to come in to our port. It took them a few days to sail in, and then they docked in Kochi, and the ship is there. For us, when this ship wanted to come in, and that too in difficulties, I think it was the humane thing to do.
As Donald Trump demands an unconditional surrender and regime change in Iran, the conflict is unlikely to end soon, with Tehran remaining firm on its retaliation. As one of the world's largest energy importers, India keeps a very close watch on the global energy and trade routes. Government says it has robust reserves and is in a comfortable situation. And politics erupts over import of Russian oil as leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi raises questions over the 1-month window for Russian oil purchase. Government says it has been importing 1 million barrels per day of Russian crude. Well, the latest updates coming in as far as the conflict is concerned is, viewers, that the Iran war has entered its second week, and with it, the dynamics of the conflict have now completely shifted. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has in fact apologized to the neighboring countries for attacks launched during its war with Israel and the US. The president has now assured that Tehran will not target the neighboring countries unless attacked from there. Pezeshkian asserted that Tehran would not surrender. This comes after US President Donald Trump demanded an unconditional surrender and select the new leader or the next leader that will follow suit. Now, that's the one set of updates that have come in, even as where back home in India, Dr. Jaishankar has explained India's decision to allow an Iranian naval vessel to dock in Kochi amidst the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Remember, this is the third Iranian vessel. The first one was sunk by American missiles. The second one sought help from the Sri Lankans, and the third one has docked in India. And in fact, India has said that the ship was caught on the wrong side of events. I'm going to play out that soundbite of Dr. Jaishankar and then get in my colleague Aditya Rajkal, who is in Tel Aviv, getting us first-hand account of how this war is now unfolding. Listen in.
We got a message from the Iranian side that one of the ships, which presumably was closest to us, to our waters at that point of time, wanted to come in to our port. They were reporting that they were having problems. So my recollection is this was on the 28th. And on the 1st, we said, okay, you can come in. It took them a few days to sail in. And then they docked in Kochi. And the ship is there. Obviously, the people on the ship, a lot of them were young cadets, that is my understanding. They have disembarked. They are in a nearby facility. For us, when this ship wanted to come in, and that too in difficulties, I think it was the humane thing to do.
All right, Aditya joins us live on the broadcast. Now, Aditya, some very important set of developments happening. The fact that the Iranian president understands that he needs to stop attacking, the Iranian neighbors is extremely significant. More so since it comes just 24 hours after he himself said that with regard to some sort of negotiations, that process has started.
Well, that's right. This is a new statement that has just come in from the Iranian President Pezeshkian, who has apologized to the neighboring countries. He said that he apologizes to the countries who were attacked. It was not their intention to attack those countries per se, but it was the US bases and the US embassies and consulates that came under attack, apart from the US logistical centers, because he says these are the countries that have given shelter and base to the Americans, who are the sworn enemies of Iranians. While he has apologized, he has also stated that now these countries will not face attacks. Does that mean that the missile attacks and the drone attacks that we have seen over the last 7 to 8 days will stop? Well, this morning there were fresh attacks that took place in Dubai and Kuwait and several other areas. We'll have to wait and watch whether this actually does means some business. Will this be implemented really by the Iranians? We'll have to wait and watch to really monitor the situation very closely. But apart from that, the situation has been very grim. There's been a humanitarian crisis, also several civilians suffering in Iran, Gaurie, and in Israel as well. There have been incoming missiles that have been coming in. The Americans have stated very clearly, the US President Donald Trump stating that at this particular stage, there's no question of ceasefire or any kind of talks. The only option, Donald Trump says, is a surrender that is to happen from the Iranian side. The Iranians have refused any kind of a surrender. There have been speculation about some backroom dialogue that might be underway. But as of now, both sides are very aggressive on their tone and tenor. They have aggressive positions and posturing right now, militarily and diplomatically. Doesn't seem like that this will end anytime soon. Lastly, I also spoke yesterday to the foreign policy advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, who stated that it will not take years, but it will take some time before this entire operation ends.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks much, Aditya, as always, for joining us with the very latest there on how things are unfolding. Now, as far as things are concerned right now, we are talking about the direct India impact. And that India impact, first and foremost, is on the oil part of it, the crude part of it, the energy part of it, all of which we are now going to decode for you in terms of how things stand. Now, tensions in the Middle East have triggered massive turmoil in global oil markets. Amidst mounting fears about supply disruptions, crude prices have now surged to over $92 per barrel. It's the highest price since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2022. Now, there's panic buying that has ensued across the globe because of the fact that there has been some sort of an increase that has taken place, particularly from, of course, countries like Bangladesh, like Pakistan, and even parts of Europe as well. But in the eye of this global storm, India right now appears relatively insulated from the immediate fallout. And the reasons for that is that India holds sufficient stocks of crude oil, petroleum products such as petrol, diesel, and of course LPG as well, with Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri on for, in fact, and the government reassuring that there is no cause of worry whatsoever with regards to energy consumers. Now, let's break this down, viewers. When you talk about this assurance, one also needs to understand the scale at which India's energy markets really operate at. And that is best told in terms of some of these numbers. First and foremost, you're talking about the strong fuel reserves. Crude oil right now that India has is for 25 days. And likewise for the refined products also, 25 days is the kind of robust reserves that India has right now. Do keep in mind that India is one of the largest consumers of energy in the world. So when you talk about 25 days of stock, you're actually talking about very big numbers. 7 to 8 weeks of total buffer that India has. Even if, let's say, you assume that things get more volatile from here on, energy markets get impacted further, you have about 250 million plus barrels of oil stock that India has. This is the reserve that ensures that markets remain under control. Prices, particularly consumer prices, remain completely under check. As far as diversified import sources are concerned, there are 40 countries, not just Hormuz Strait, where about 40% of India's imports come from, but there are several other countries. In fact, it includes not just the Middle East, but also Russia, US and Africa as well. When you talk about Russia, in fact, the government has said over 1 million barrels per day is the kind of imports that's coming in from Russia. That's very important. Now, let me walk you through quickly in terms of the refining capacity that India has. This is how the numbers stack up. 258 million metric tons per year and 210 to 230 million metric tons per year is the kind of consumption. What does that mean? It means capacity for exports. India has been exporting a large amount in terms of refinery. So there is a buffer that can be potentially used as well. Potentially because there are commercial interests involved, but this is where things stand right now, under control. Reduced import pressure also comes in because of the fact that there's a 20% ethanol that has blending that has been put in for petrol, and that saves about 44 million barrels of crude annually. All of this, as I said, you can't understand India's energy markets till you put some of these numbers out to understand the scale at which India operates. And this also means that fuel supply and prices actually stabilize significantly. Now, what does all of this really add up and mean for you? Let's simplify that. It means stable fuel supply. No nationwide pump shortages have happened in the last 12 years, since 2014. And that is the big takeaway that the government wants everyone to keep in mind. No shortages, no price hikes, no uncertainty, no volatility. What it means is continuity for every consumer. And I think that's most important. And viewers, when US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in fact announced a 30-day waiver allowing Indian refiners to import Russian oil, the move was strategic because it ensures that it eases pressure on global oil markets amidst the Middle East crisis, because India has a very large demand and that could impact prices. Now, there's one thing what I also want to now point out, which is that India's exposure does remain, but it is also looking to keep things under control. However, if this war continues, no one knows what it could end up being. There will be some sort of a pressure on oil, and there will be a pressure on Indian rupee as well. That is inevitable. And I think that is where the test of both diplomacy and prudent economic planning will really come out. All right, beyond the economic impact of the war, there is the political fallout as well. The war has led to sharpening of political divides in India. The Congress party has done the following, and I'm going to point that out one by one. First and foremost, an op-ed was written by Sonia Gandhi, where she questioned the government's purported silence on the war. Now, this was followed by Rahul Gandhi questioning the American statement about the 30-day window for purchase of Russian oil. This is what the government has said. In addition, it has said this is really about superpowers. This is what the Congress's stand has been. Now, this is where things actually stand, viewers, because at the end of the day, this is not just about a war of words. This is far more serious. India has ties with both Israel and Iran. It has deep connects with all countries that have been struck by Iranian drones and missiles in the region. Add to it the sheer number of Indians that reside in the Gulf. You're talking about 90 million, all of whom stand deeply exposed. And right now, given the scale of the war, that is a very serious fact. And taking a strong position either way actually risks lives, and that's what needs to be understood before we move on to the political war of words leading to some sort of sharpening of attacks. This needs to be kept in mind most importantly. And I think there's been voices that have come in from both sides and particularly from several quarters in the opposition side as well. There has been voices from Trinamool, Bengal goes to polls, and you have voices coming in from TMC also saying about whether or not there'll be energy certainty, something that the government has clarified on. Now, on India's sense, the focus has been the fallout of the war on India on all aspects. We covered the political war of words, we covered the energy aspect of it, we now talk about the strategic impact of the war. And this is where things get layered and complicated. The Iranian missiles that downed in Sri Lankan waters mean that the war theatre has expanded rapidly, reached India's backyard. Sri Lanka also has deep economic linkages with China, the country that is openly backing Iran, condemning US and Israel, the country that gets massively impacted because of the change in the energy routes. And this will require India to navigate the present situation both deftly and pragmatically. As far as the China angle is concerned, viewers, not only is China supporting Iran, it will also be significantly impacted by the changed oil dynamics. China is the #1 importer of Iran oil. And the longer this war drags, the more its energy needs will be at risk. It's no coincidence that China lowered its annual economic growth target to the lowest level since 1991, even as Beijing continues its rapid development of several other industries. And that means that China will be impacted. Its top oil sources are Iran, followed by Venezuela, both of whom have been massively hit. And economic fallouts are never in isolation, viewers. They often lead to larger geopolitical impact. And that's something that needs to be remembered when one talks about the larger fallout of this for India from a strategic point of view, from its neighborhood point of view. And in fact, those are the big questions that we are posing to our guests joining us this week on India Sense. First and foremost, has the dynamics of the war now completely changed? That's the first key question that we ask, with Pezeshkian saying he's not going to be attacking any of the other neighboring countries. Has that now completely changed the war from here on? Secondly, could this conflict drag on indefinitely simply because there are two completely different positions that exist from the American side and from the Iranian side? Thirdly, how will India's strategic position be tested in the midst of this? We spoke about Sri Lanka, we spoke about China, so many other aspects. Next up, what will be the economic fallout on India? War enters the neighborhood. Will India's balancing act be tested from here on? Those are some of the questions that we're going to put forth to Michael Feller, who's the co-founder and chief strategist of geopolitical strategy, joining us from Australia, from Melbourne. And we have DP Srivastava, former Indian ambassador to Iran, with us as well. In fact, Ambassador Srivastava, let me start with you. We've put out some of those important aspects, all of which are likely to be the key areas of impact for India. In your assessment, some of the questions that we put forth, has the context now completely changed for this conflict, with the Iranian president saying the attacks will not be on any of the country's neighbors going forward? Ambassador Srivastava?
I don't think so, because Iran never said that they are going to attack the neighboring country.
Okay, I believe there's an audio issue, sir. We'll try and connect and fix that in just a bit. Michael Feller, you want to take that question?
Yes. So if you could pose the question again.
I'm saying, has the war dynamics now completely changed, with the Iranian president saying that he will not be attacking neighboring countries?
No, I don't think so, because he gave himself a lot of wriggle room in that comment when he mentioned that countries who aren't involved in attacking Iran, and how one defines attacking Iran or those countries' involvement means everything. So whilst Qatar isn't attacking Iran, it does host US facilities, so you could argue that it is. Same with the United Arab Emirates, same with Kuwait. I saw that message as more directed to countries like Azerbaijan that don't host US assets and haven't been involved directly. I also see that as a message to Pakistan, which hasn't been involved directly, yet Saudi Arabia has requested consultations with Pakistan under their security arrangement, where there is a mutual defence clause. So I saw Pezeshkian's message is primarily directed at those countries rather than the Gulf. I think we will see one way or another attacks on Gulf countries continue. And I also think that it's not really Pezeshkian's prerogative to say this. Military matters, one, are the purview of the IRGC and the Supreme Leader. And secondly, if Iran truly is employing this so-called mosaic deterrence doctrine, which pushes down decision-making to the battalion level, to the unit level, then Tehran can't really make those undertakings with any confidence, I would think.
Okay, so that's an important point you're making, that this is primarily directed towards Azerbaijan, Pakistan, and not the other countries who continue to host large American assets and bases. Ambassador Srivastava, I want to ask to you largely the question pertaining to the India impact, whether you talk about the oil impact, whether you talk about the fact that this has now expanded, the war theatre has expanded all the way till India's backyard. How do you read those very important signs?
You know, the closure of the Persian Gulf or Hormuz Strait has removed 20% of the global oil supply in one stroke. there's no alternative source to compensate for loss of supplies on such a scale, and for which an exemption was offered by President Trump. That is only about the Russian oil on the high seas, and that is simply 7 million barrels. And India imports 2.4 million barrels a day from Persian Gulf. Now, there are other claimants also for the 7 million barrel. In fact, most of this may already be committed to China. Even assuming that this was available to us, this would hardly meet our 2 days requirements. So there is no other source which can compensate for this scale. Therefore, the prices will shoot up. And they have already shot up. They have gone up to $94. That is $14 increase in 6 days. And if you take it over a month's period, it's about $18 to $19 increase. $1 increase in the price of oil translates into an annual increase in India's annual import bill of 14,000 crores, or roughly $1.8 billion. So this is in case that oil price hike is sustained. So this is going to be a major burden. Now, the second part is the LNG.
Right.
And India imports 55% of LNG from this region, of which Qatar provides 40%. Qatar has stopped producing and exporting LNG in last 2 days after attack on the Ras Laffan refinery.
Yes.
So LNG prices, the spot prices for Asian markets have tripled in 2 days, from $10 to $35.
So those are very important points you're making, sir. And at no point of time that we have not been able to really fully grasp what lies ahead. One is that an increase in oil impacts our overall finances. And if you add to it the rupee volatility, which is only likely, then the import bill could actually be higher on both accounts, both of which are points to which the government has said that they have robust reserves and they are in a comfortable position. But Michael Feller, I want to bring you in on just this aspect as well. One is the energy markets, the supply routes, all of which that have been impacted. Second is the fact that suddenly the war theatre has expanded so much. This is not just a war that's taking place in the Middle East. You have now the entire Indo-Pacific also standing completely exposed. And you are in Melbourne. And many believe that, and in fact, it was in Australia itself that Mark Carney and Anthony Albanese spoke about how this war could have more NATO allies as well. So your sense of the enlarging nature of the war theatre?
Yes, that's right. And sadly, Australia hasn't been as forward-thinking as India, and our supplies, our stocks are nowhere near as large as yours, even though we are an oil producer in our own right. So it's scary for everybody in the region. It's also scary, obviously, because we saw that Iranian ship torpedoed off the coast of Sri Lanka, and there were 3 Australian sailors on the US submarine. They were being trained. They weren't directly involved in the torpedoing, yet you can see that there's multiple links there. One thing I will say about the ships in that region is that India's humanitarian decision to take the Iranian ship into Kochi, that does pose a risk that, of course, the US may decide to take away those waivers in response. They see any Iranian ship as a combatant and wouldn't like to see that ship being protected by any third party. So that's just a wild card to watch. I'm not necessarily suggesting that will happen. I think
that is well within the realm of possibility, and that's a very fair assessment of what you're saying. That's correct. And in fact, let's take a quick word from Ambassador Srivastava on just that. Ambassador Srivastava, you want to come in on what Michael Feller just said? Okay, I believe that audio line needs to be fixed again.
Yes, there's going to be a risk of expansion, but there's a larger point. Let me just touch on it. The expansion of warring from nuclear issue.
Unfortunately, sir, that audio line needs to be fixed and we'll try and connect some other time. But very quickly, Michael Feller, 30 seconds, we have to close this. Second, I want to ask about is the final word, which is about the larger issue with regards to India's balancing act. We've been very clear about the fact that we have ties with both Israel and Iran, and we will maintain that. You see that happening?
Yes, India is committed to multi-alignment. I don't see that changing. I think that the actions of the United States last year with regards to tariffs have borne out India's decision to stand alone as the sensible decision. I think India can't afford to be too dependent on one economy, on one market. So in India's position, multi-alignment makes sense. But of course, it does lead to dangers because you can be seen as being partisan, even though you're not. So this is the nature of wars. Also, it's the nature of the Western mentality, which is very much black and white, either or. It's not used to such multi-polarity or multi-alignment strategies. But perhaps the West will get used to that as well, because that's definitely the world that we're heading into.
Or perhaps there'll be more divine intervention, just like what we saw in Oval Office about a couple of hours back. I'm going to leave it there. Michael Feller, thanks much for speaking to me on India Sense, viewers. There are several aspects and dimensions to the impact, the fallout that India is facing. As things stand right now, things are under control. But if this war continues, if this drags further, today, week 3, week 4, and further on, impact will be felt on several fronts. And we at India Sense will keep decoding that for you. Thanks so much for watching this episode.